Hi, and welcome to our video on comprehension. Today we're looking at some of the top secrets for acing the exams as it relates to comprehension. So before we begin, let's look at really what comprehension is. Now, comprehension really encompasses the entire purpose of reading. So if you see words but you don't understand what is there, you really have not read. May I repeat that? Yes. If you just call the words but you have no understanding of what they represent, then you really have not read. So, what are the types of questions that we encounter in reading comprehension? And there are various types. So, for example, if you're sitting the CSEC examination, you may encounter maybe 6 questions for a passage, and each question will be targeting a different level of thinking. So, here are some types of questions: main idea, factual, inference, application, author style and purpose, and tone. So let's look a little bit at main idea question. All right. Now, as the title of this slide suggests, main would be the same as the most important idea. So this is a general idea that is coming across. These questions test your ability to understand, what the overall theme or overarching idea is from the passage. And if you're able to find the primary purpose of the extract. So the questions may be framed in particular ways. You may see, what is the passage about? What is the central idea? And these are just some of the ways that the question may be framed, but they're really just asking you for the main idea. Candidates are required to find information that is directly stated in the passage, and these are the factual type questions. So the factual questions now don't require much thinking, don't require much deep thought. You don't have to be picking your brain to figure it out because they are all there. It is just for you to find it in the passage. And these are supporting details. So for example, what are some examples of fruit mentioned in the passage? If you look in the passage, you should be able to see all of the examples of fruit that are there. Also, things like statistical references, these are factual questions. So, if, for example, they ask you for things like date, time, anything having to do with a percentage or a number, then of course that would be a factual question because it is literally there. It's not colored by emotion or feeling. It is just the raw fact. And inference. How many persons know what inferential questions are? Right? So inferencing is one of those comprehension skills that requires you now to read between the lines. And that is just, a simple way of saying that you have to use the evidence that is there and, of course, come to a conclusion based on that. So you're required to draw conclusions from ideas implied or suggested by the writer. So let us say that you have a passage about winter and they describe the persons as shivering. They're wearing sweaters and all of this. Then this would imply that the weather is cold. And so the examples of how these questions are framed would be how, why, and what conclusion can be drawn from. And of course, you look at what is there, you put it together, and then you come to a conclusion. Now, we're moving on to another type of question that we may see in a comprehension. It's called an application question. So these questions ask about the possible application of the author's ideas to other situations. So, you may be presented with one scenario in the passage, but they may ask you what you would do if you were in a similar situation, and that means that you have to assimilate that situation. You have to use the information, look at what the author presented, and then now put it to your own experience. So this includes the identification of situations or processes similar to those described in the passage. So, they may ask you, what would you do if you were in a similar situation? All right? Or if you were in, the character's shoes. Now, for author style, this is, of course, another type of question. And this is really about the author's logic, reasoning, writing style, or even persuasive techniques. To answer these types of questions, you must be familiar with things such as literary devices, persuasive techniques, so that you can identify any that the writer utilizes. Now, in our presentation on persuasive techniques, you'd be able to see some of the examples of those techniques. And of course, in our presentation for literary devices, you'll also see examples. So, for example, a writing style could be that the writer uses a lot of figurative language, maybe a lot of metaphor and simile. However, if it is a persuasive article, perhaps the writer will use a lot of rhetorical questions, right, to get the reader to think, okay? Now, this is one of my favorites, tone or mood. And of course, usually these questions come out in narrative pieces or in poetry. And I hope you realize by now that answering comprehension questions, you must also know the different pieces of writing and what they come with. So the question is to describe the passages or the writer's tone, or to describe the mood in the passage. Now, the tone or mood of a passage gives information on the author's attitude. And of course, this is revealed in the type of language he or she uses. And of course, the author's attitude and the language used can alter or have implications on the overall mood. And that is how you, the reader, feel when you read the passage. All right. So, for example, a tone could be sarcastic. It could be cynical, because that is the author's attitude towards the situation. All right. We could also, and usually those words are tied to emotion. You'll find that even sometimes we may read something and the overall mood could be one of, if I should look at a poem, for example, I shall return. What do you think the mood is in that poem? Anybody guessed? Well, in the poem I shall return, the speaker is thinking about his life in Jamaica and all of the different aspects that he misses. And so the overall tone Mood is one of nostalgia. All right, that feeling of sadness and longing for his homeland. All right, now before we get into our other video, we want you to just do some research. Now, here are some different types of passages, and I want you to look at the different characteristics of these passages, and hopefully they'll help you when you're responding to the comprehension questions. So there is a distinct difference in the types of questions sometimes asked based on the passages presented. So you may find similar wording for poetry and narrative pieces. The expository pieces, they will ask a lot of factual questions. And of course, the argumentative pieces are going to look for persuasive techniques, writer's style, and tone. All right. So next time when we look at the different types of writing, we'll see what we learn. Have a good day.